Welcome back to the Made for This podcast, where we want to help you discover, develop, and live your Made for This. I'm back here with Nikki as we are kind of going through this first few episodes where we're sort of describing, what it is we're all about. And we've talked about in the last few episodes what the Made for This is, why it is important. And in this episode and the next episode, we want to kind of start to introduce how you can start to discover that on your own and wherever you are on your journey, that you can kind of dive right into this thing. So we're going to break down a few in this first episode, and then in the next episode, we're going to bring it home, and hopefully that it will give you the tools that you need to, wherever you are, whether you kind of know what you are all about, what you were born or made to do, or you have absolutely no clue, you can start to ask the right questions and start to figure these things out.
So let's kick it off with our silly debate.
Yeah. That's
So, I've recently seen a lot of people promoting Wingstop. I've not been to Wingstop yet, but I was curious what you thought was better, drumsticks or flats?
Oh, I am 100% drumsticks.
Defend that. Why? Because flats are just by far better.
Okay. First of all, I didn't know they were called flats. I think until I met you. I guess I never heard them called that until
the wing community calls them that. So.
Well, yeah, I think you were the first person I heard say that, but now I know what they are. For anyone who is,
what did you call them before that?
I don't know.
Not drumsticks.
The other things, the wings, they're wings, and the other ones are legs. I don't know. The drumsticks. And so if anyone is listening to this and didn't know that, the flats are the ones that aren't the drumsticks.
They're the ones. Yeah.
They're not that flat though. But I think the drumsticks are number one. I think there's more meat.
There's not.
Okay. Are you sure?
I'm sure. I have compared. There is more meat on the flats when you eat them properly.
Okay.
There's far more meat. And the best part about it is if you tear off that little end piece, right? And then you pull the meat off the bones, it actually is like hollow in the middle, so you can get the dipping sauce in the center of that big chunk of wing meat.
Yeah, but with the drumstick, you can just dip the thing in the wing sauce.
Yeah, but then you have to bite it off the bone, and that's icky because then gristle and
they're handheld. Like the drumsticks have a handle, and they're way better.
The flats also have a handle.
No.
When you pull the end, there's the end piece.
Also, because I have this weird thing about my hands, and I don't like things on my hands.
You probably just need boneless wings, so you need them with a fork.
Yeah, I do like boneless wings. Definitely have more meat.
In this debate, my son would say boneless.
Yeah,
that's the answer.
Well, I like boneless. I like bone-in wings too, but the drumsticks give you the handle, and the meat is all concentrated on one end. You can dip it in whatever sauce you prefer.
Okay. So my proposal is that we get our spouses and we finally utilize the gift card that we won to a pizza place.
Like 2 years ago.
And we'll show you how to eat the flats properly.
Okay.
So that then you can really understand, because they are superior.
All right.
They just are. There are people who order nothing but flats.
Really?
Yeah.
I would order just drumsticks.
You'd be wrong.
In fact, when I go to like a buffet or somewhere, or there's just a giant order of wings, I will and you're getting filling your plate with the tongs, I will just grab the drumsticks.
That's selfish.
But anyone who just
the other drumstick people behind you are like,
yeah, well, probably
all the flats.
But the flat people really love it.
Yeah.
I guess if the flat people are behind me, then
we're a minority.
Is that, you think?
I think so. We're probably smarter. Let us know. Yeah. I'm curious because I do think that flat lovers we're in the lesser numbers.
You think? Well, that is, yeah.
People just don't know.
We should have a poll or something.
Yeah.
Let us know if you're watching this on YouTube or listening. If you're engaging with this in any way that you can leave a comment, do that. Otherwise, go to the show notes, send us an email. We would like to hear where you fall on this. I don't think I'm budging on the drumsticks unless we go use our gift card.
You just need to learn.
Yeah, unless we go use our gift card and you can show me the superiority, then I don't know. I'm still on the drumstick.
The messy hands thing's what's going to lose you.
Yeah, and some places just don't have the little wet thing.
Moist towelettes.
Yeah.
You have toddlers. You always have wet towelettes.
That's true. That's true.
One of the things of having toddlers.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, so this exercise.
Yep.
Usually when we're walking people through this, It's a larger chunk of time.
Sure.
Right. So we had to break this up somehow. And just conveniently enough, it kind of breaks into two categories of natural things that are just, you're born with as a person, and also that you could share with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So you can the first ones that we're going to talk about today are definitely ones that you may know someone who you're very similar in these areas with. And then the ones we'll talk about next episode are things that are intentional, that are unique to you, that are things that maybe either you have intentionally developed or things that you have experienced that would be unique to you.
Yeah. So before we dive into the kind of the ones that you're born with in this episode, let's just do a quick outline of what the exercise looks like. So we're talking all about, I was made to do this thing. Like, I feel like this is why God put me on the earth to do this thing. This is my made for this. And so we've sort of, and I'll put this on the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening, go find us on YouTube and you can see it, or you can probably find it on social media or something. But if you imagine a funnel, right? And for my marketing folks, like I think the entire world can be boiled down to a funnel in one way or another,
or buckets.
Yeah. But a funnel. So if you imagine a funnel, the kind of the top things are things that you're born with, things that are just kind of natural to you. And it filters all the way down to things that are so unique to you. And as you kind of pass through this funnel and you sort of sequentially take a look at all five of these things, then you can kind of start to identify, like, man, this is the very unique, this is the most unique version of me. Like, this is the seat that only I can sit in. And so those five things are, number one is personality. This is kind of like just who you are naturally, and we're all familiar with personality and how when you bump into someone with a very different personality than you, it's like, oh, okay, well, that's different. The second thing is passion. What are the things that you're just super passionate about naturally? And the third thing is strengths. These are your natural talents, gifts, and whatever that looks like for you. And so those are the things that you're kind of born with. And then stepping into the things that you've been intentional about, or the things that your life has actually looked like. The fourth thing is skills. And that's the things that you've spent some time actually developing. You've practiced, or you've honed skills, and these things could be things that you're naturally gifted at, like your talents,
right.
But you've spent some time working on them. And then the last thing is your experience. All of those other things sort of are filtered through the things that you've lived, and that's what makes them so unique to you. And so, Nikki, you've mentioned in the past that like, there's people who have your same strengths and personality and all those things, but they haven't experienced the things that you've experienced.
Right.
And so that's the uniqueness.
The same thing too, interestingly enough, because when you look reverse, studies have been shown that, like, even siblings who grow up in the same household who may have had the same experiences, because of their personality, those experiences will impact them differently.
Yeah.
And so even having some shared experiences with somebody, two individuals can experience the same event, and it will show up in their life vastly different because of how they're wired and who they are.
Yeah, and it'll just manifest differently in how they kind of express all of those things. And really, when it comes, and we're going to spend more of next week's episode talking about the experience piece, but when it comes down to it, all of the things that you're naturally good at or passionate about are all going to be expressed through the lived experiences that you've had. And that's how, like, that's the lens through which you see the world.
Yeah.
It's like, I've experienced these great things and these terrible things, and it's kind of shaped who I am and how I take the things that I'm really good at and how I push them out into the world.
Yep.
So take off on personality.
So I don't know if we're just particularly nerdy in this aspect, or if everybody loves a personality test. But there are so many out there you can utilize. So we'll talk about strengths in a minute, but personality tests are funny for me because individualization is my number one strength, which means I see every person as an individual. Personality tests will tend to generalize you. So if you're going to take a personality test like Enneagram or Myers-Briggs or any of those types of things, you're going to kind of get a generalization of what a person with those personality traits how they might present in the world,
Right.
which is helpful to notice your tendencies
Mm-hmm.
and behaviors, but it's not always going to be 100% accurate for everybody. Like I'm an Enneagram 6 and I have a friend who's an Enneagram 6 and she and I see the world in different ways. We see the world in similar ways also, but we present differently even though we have the same Enneagram type. And so that's just one of those ways that personality tests, while they can help you start to learn your motivations and things like that about your personality, there's still going to be some pieces where you as an individual
Sure.
are going to maybe differ from
Yeah.
those personality traits.
Yeah, and I would say that number one, we definitely are nerdier than the normal
Well,
person.
that's okay.
But I think anyone who's listening to this podcast hopefully
Right.
can identify with that. And throughout this entire show, like in multiple episodes in the future, we're going to talk a lot more about those types of different things, assessments and this the nerdy stuff. But you make a really good point. Like if your Enneagram number or your Myers-Briggs type or whatever is like, that's not the gospel truth. I
Right.
mean, and there's going to be things where you don't quite fit inside the box. And there's going to be other things where like we Nikki, you said you're an Enneagram 6. I'm an Enneagram 1 and I follow Instagram profiles that have all the
Right.
numbers, and I will read those things sometimes and be like, gosh, that is me. That is
Yeah.
me.
Personal attacks.
Yeah, like I feel personal, like somebody's staring through my window or reading all my emails or something. And I feel like sometimes you'll have that experience, and other times you'll say, I don't know, that's not really me.
Yeah.
But I think that's what's really interesting about the whole Made for This exercise as kind of like a giant package is because your personality, it's not going to be a textbook of you.
Right.
The same thing with, the strengths and the, skills, all of those things. But as you start to package them all together, you get kind of a unique picture of who you are. And then, you may even be able to identify some of the places where you're like, well, I'm an extrovert, but like,
Right.
and this is a little different about me, or I'm an Enneagram 1, but I kind of identify with something over here a little bit more.
Yeah. I will say, just as a kind of aside to these exercises, number one, I think that this exercise is really best done with other people.
100%.
It's so much more helpful to have someone else speaking into, for you to say like, hey, these are the results that I got from these tests, or, these types of things. What do you think? Asking people who know you best what their opinions are on that. Number two, if you read ahead of time about certain Enneagrams or Myers-Briggs or those types of things, and you think you know who you are, sometimes that will skew your test result.
Yeah, that's true.
And so making sure that you aren't taking these with a preconceived idea of who you are or what your personality is, because that can tend to skew some things. And we aren't all really great at being self-aware. So sometimes we think we are a way that we are not. And so being really honest in this exercise, I think, is really important, and allowing kind of those things to come out instead of just going into it like, I already know who I am and I know what I'm going to test on these, because you might be surprised.
Yeah. Well, I took the Enneagram a handful of times, and I've gotten a couple different numbers as I think that I've learned as I've studied a little bit that Enneagram 1s tend to mistype as a couple other things depending on certain environments or circumstances. And so I tested as a 3 one time and as an 8 one time. And it wasn't until I sat down with an actual coach. And so Nikki and I have both seen this same coach who's like a certified Enneagram expert. And we've got to get her on here if we can sometime. But she walked me through some things that I had no idea about, and just really, really fascinating. And so having someone who's kind of outside, or someone who can recognize the things in you that maybe you, because you lack any sort of self-awareness that you may not pick up on, is really, really helpful.
What I've learned from the personalities perspective of this exam specifically, or this exercise specifically, is knowing my personality type, knowing what my natural bent is that I'm born with, allows me to be able to recognize why I react to certain things or certain situations the way that I do. And it's just information then. It's not necessarily something that I feel a need to control, which as a 6, control is a kind of a big thing. But it allows me to just go, oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because of my personality type, I respond to this in a different way than my husband would.
Right.
And so we will respond to 2 different things, and it doesn't mean anything. Neither one of us is right. It's just interesting to see how those personality traits that you were born with, that you were created with, cause you to interact with the world.
Yeah.
And it's going to be unique.
Yeah, and how you respond to the outside
Mhm.
kind of stimulus that
Yeah.
you are presented with, whether it's a stressor or something that you are just enjoy.
Yeah.
Like those outside things are going to influence how you interact with the world because you just have a specific way that you were kind of wired, your
Yeah.
brain chemistry and all of those different things. So, anything else you have to say on personality?
No.
Okay, so in the show notes, we're going to include some links to just different things: an Enneagram assessment, the Myers-Briggs or the 16 personalities, which uses the Myers-Briggs kind of model, and we'll leave links to a bunch of stuff down there. Some of them will cost money. That's up to you if you want to use those things or not. We don't work for those people.
You could probably always find a free version.
Yeah. Although if Gallup wants to sponsor the show and throw us some support,
So.
we could talk about that. But the Strengths Finder may be in there, and it costs a little bit of money. But just take what you want and start to kind of walk through this exercise. And so these are just some things that you and I, Nikki, have used and gotten some value out of for the personality and beyond. And so go ahead and check those out. So the next thing is passion.
Yeah.
And this is the one, and this one I don't think really, at least nothing that I've discovered, this one doesn't come with like a quantified assessment that you can take.
No.
Although I would like for it to.
This is so passion, because there's no quantified assessment. I don't know who came up with these 3 questions, where they came from. We'd love to give somebody credit for it. It's not us. We did not come up with these, right?
I don't think so.
Okay. They're
Or
great questions.
We may have adapted them in certain ways, but
Yeah. So the 3 questions for passion is to ask yourself, what wakes you up in the morning?
mm-hmm.
What are those things that just motivate you to do things? What keeps you up at night?
Mhm.
You and I both struggle with intrusive thoughts, and so we may be kept up more than others. And then the last one is, what are the things that make you want to get in there? Kind of the sports analogy is, what are the things that say, put me in, coach? Like, I want to be in there. Those things that just... Culturally relevant moment. Travis Kelce screaming at his coach on the sidelines of the Super Bowl.
Ugh.
He was so passionate about being in that game. He was so passionate about winning that he's like, put me in there.
Yeah.
That type of, so what are those things that make you go, put me in there because I can make a difference?
Yeah.
I need to be in there.
Yeah. And those are questions that you may have to wrestle with for a while.
Yeah.
Or they may be things that, immediately come to mind. You're like, oh yeah, these are the things. Like whether you're, really passionate about interacting with a certain demographic of people or a certain kind of projects or whatever, you may know that, or you may have to really sit and think about those things. But when you start to think about like, what are the things that, like when my alarm clock goes off, like it's the first thing that comes to my mind. Like, oh, I gotta do this. I want to do that. I think today is going to bring this. And then when you lay your head down at night, what are the questions that are swirling around in your mind? Now, maybe they're intrusive, or maybe they're just like, man, today was a great day.
Yeah.
Because I got to do these things. Or the things that keep you up at night could be the things that are just like, gosh, I really need, like, I feel like I'm uniquely designed and equipped to solve this problem in the world. And like you sit there with your, staring at the ceiling at night thinking like, how do I fix this? That could be it too. And then Travis Kelce. Okay. I want to know, did Travis Kelce go too far?
No.
No?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right.
That people who know me know that I'm a fan of Taylor Swift. However, I was a fan of Travis Kelce long before Taylor was a fan of him.
Yeah.
I will say that. And so knowing his and Coach Reed's relationship, knowing that Coach Reed is like a second dad to him, he's super close to his dad, but Coach Reed coached his brother and coaches him, and they have this relationship where Coach Reed gets in his face and screams at him and pushes him around, and that is just their dynamic. And watching that clip back, you realize that not only did he startle Coach Reed, the moment he realized that Coach Reed lost balance, because he's a top-heavy man, Travis grabbed his arm and kind of shored him up. So it looks like he was grabbing him, but really he grabbed him in that oh no, I
Oh,
almost knocked the big man over. And so
I
I
don't know.
think he apologized though.
Yeah.
But I think anybody who's been really passionate about something
Oh, yeah.
has
Yeah.
gotten a little intense.
You're right. You're right. And I say that, although I would like to hear from the community. If
Yeah.
if you,
I've seen you get intense with a friend of ours where it looked like you were fighting.
yeah.
But really, you were just both really passionate.
Yeah, and that works. That works. When you are passionate, sometimes the emotions come out,
Mhm.
or and sometimes you get a little ramped up.
Yeah.
But let us know in the comments if you're watching or listening somewhere you can do that. Let us know, did Travis Kelsey go too far? But I think really the point is he is super. It was the Super Bowl,
Yeah.
and it was like this was a big deal, and he
Mhm.
was super passionate. And I think
Yeah.
the passion, whether or not he went too far, it was a moment of
Right.
passion. And I think if you have more information on their relationship than I do, um, and if that's the relationship that they have, maybe they talked about it later. But I think
Yeah.
at any rate, when you're so passionate about something, sometimes you can
Mhm.
make have questionable moments.
Yeah, I have a tendency because so if you learn about the Enneagram, you'll know that there's also tri-type. So you have your main type, and then you have a
Mm,
tri-type, and so 8 is my second like number. So I'd score a 6 at like a 98, and my 8 is like a 93%. So they're pretty close quarters with each other. And my 8 comes out a lot when I'm passionate,
yeah.
especially if it is in the defense of others. If I feel like someone is being marginalized, if I feel like people are being pushed around that don't have the ability or mechanisms to defend themselves,
Mm-hmm.
I tend to get it can appear aggressive
Yeah.
because I'm passionate about something and I'm going to go to the mat for people. And so I think that passion, and those are the things that there's only certain things that I will do that for. And those are the
Right.
things that fall in the passion category for me. Those are the things that I landed myself on 3 boards one time because 3 different nonprofits were doing what I'm passionate about. And I
Mhm.
said, put me in, coach.
Yeah.
And that overloaded my plate.
Well,
Sometimes we do that. That's
yeah,
okay.
and typically we won't when it's not something we're passionate about. You bring up a good point. Is like your 8 doesn't really come out. Your aggression doesn't really come out if it's not something you
Yeah.
are passionate about. And I think that's another way you can kind of start to identify this is what are the things that you're willing to take a risk on?
Mm-hmm.
Because stepping onto too many boards is that there was some risk in that,
Yeah.
or getting aggressive. That there's some interpersonal risk there. Like
Mm-hmm.
am I willing to potentially uh, create tension in a relationship,
Right.
or say something that could get me in trouble depending on the context,
Yeah.
whether it's a professional environment or a friend environment or whatever. But if you're still willing to take those risks, then that's a good indicator that that's something that you're passionate enough about to kind of push the envelope a
Yeah.
little bit. Because if it's something you're like, I'm indifferent about that, I'm not going to risk a friendship
Right.
or a professional a promotion or whatever
Yeah.
on saying something that I don't really care that much about.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's maybe another question you could start asking yourself is where am I willing to take the risk?
Yeah.
So the third sort of element, and this is the one that, this is the last one that is kind of just you're just born with.
Mm-hmm.
This is when we're talking about you were made for this. Like certain things are just like depending on where you fall in the spectrum of faith, you can say that these are just the things that God's built into you, or whatever biological mechanisms like you were born with these things. And the last one of those is your strengths.
Yeah.
And this is your natural, like your giftings or your talents or whatever. These are the things that you can kind of pick up faster than the average bear.
Yeah.
And they just come like like some people can just pick up tools and make something.
Yeah.
Me, I'm not that guy. Like I have no
Shocking.
talent and no natural gifting in building something. If you're watching on YouTube, there's a coffee table that has one piece of wood and 4 kind of wire legs. I got this from a friend at Stuff and Things. If you're in the local area where Nikki and I are, you can look them up. And I looked at the instructions to build this coffee table. I did not need to look at the instructions,
You did not.
but I'm not naturally gifted in that. And it's something that I struggle with every time I
Yeah.
try to do something, anytime I'm putting something together. Meanwhile, I don't know that you would consider that a natural talent, but you put everything together without the instructions.
And I think that goes back to your sequential, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm a global thinker.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I don't know if that does that fall under strengths or passions or the personality.
That's probably a personality thing. That's another one we can put in the show notes.
Yeah.
That's
So there's a exam that basically tells you if you're a sequential thinker or if you're a global picture thinker. If you're a you want to see the end results and then figure out how to work backward to
Mhm.
get to that end result, or do you want to start at step
Point A.
one and figure out how you're going to get to the end result?
Yeah,
And
I'll
that's
leave
just different wirings.
I'll leave a link for that in the show notes too. That's the NC State Learning Assessment. And that one's fascinating. That one's a really quick little
Hmm.
thing. And I think it just gives you like 6 or 8 different things where
Yeah, it
you
was a
fall
fast one.
between, so you fall somewhere on a spectrum of I'm really high sequential, you're really high global, but you could be somewhere in the middle. I
Yeah.
mean, I can't even remember what the others are, but I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah. So I think for the strengths, of course, there are, the tests that you can take, spiritual giftings and the strengths finder, which we absolutely love. That costs a little bit of money, but it's worth it.
Yeah, it's really
Does the book still come with a code in the back?
I think so.
So if you buy the book, then it comes with a code for the exam. So then you get a book and a test,
Yeah, and
which
they
is
have a
a good
handful of
deal.
different books, and they will kind of like some of them are about leadership using strengths, and some of them are just about personality, like your personal how you can leverage your personal strengths. But there's a couple different options, and if they come with that code, then it's worth it to
Yeah.
get the book and get the code with it.
This is another place where I think it's really important to involve others in your life,
Mm-hmm.
because we oftentimes, unless you're just a super confident person, we tend to downplay our strengths,
Mm-hmm.
and we tend to focus a lot more on our weaknesses. Just as humans, we can probably list off 10 things we're bad at, but we struggle to think of 5 things that we're good at.
Yep.
And so I think it's really helpful, especially for young people, if you're listening to the podcast and you are, a young adult or a teenager, it can be really, really helpful to ask other people in your life, like,
Mhm.
what are my natural strengths? What are my talents? Because people on the outside can see things about you and call out those things that maybe you don't even see it as a strength. It could be something that you see as a negative, and
Mhm.
other people are like, no, that's a
Yeah.
really cool thing that you're able to do. Like, I wish I could do that. So that's a really great one to kind of involve people in, but to also use those tests to kind of see those things. And we've talked about this before with the Strengths Finder, and I think even the spiritual gifts. Just because you have a natural gifting towards something
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that it's a skill yet.
Right.
It could very well be something that if you don't use it, you lose it.
Yep.
Like it doesn't get developed. Just because you have a natural ability for something or a natural gifting in something doesn't mean that it's just immediately you're good at that. You're still probably going to have to put in some work with that.
Yeah, absolutely. The book on Strengths Finder talks about that specifically. It said these are the things that are essentially things that you're probably going to have a natural tendency to get really good at.
Mhm.
And so if you focus on developing them, then they can really be incredible strengths.
Yeah.
If you don't though, they may not express themselves as strengths. And so if you take this assessment, well, if you take the version that I took, there's multiple versions of it. You can pay quite a bit more, and you can get all 34 of your strengths in order. I only got the top 5. That's really all I needed. Although I do get curious about my bottom 5. I'm more curious
Yeah.
about my bottom 5 than like 6 through 10. But you get your top 5 strengths, and you can kind of start to see how you interact with those things. But those will then be the things that I have a natural propensity to be good at these things if I spend the time developing them.
Yeah. Like I have one in my top 5 that I have no desire to develop.
Yeah.
So you may see one and go, ick.
Yeah.
I don't want to
Maybe.
develop that one.
Maybe.
So
Yeah.
I don't know.
And so if you are coming from Nikki and I are both people of faith. We worked together at a local church for a while. If you're coming from that faith angle, then you may get a lot of really cool insight out of there's kind of 2 specific ones that I've appreciated in the past is the spiritual gifts assessment
Mhm.
that you mentioned. And there's another one called the APEST. And there's somewhere in the Bible, I wish I should have looked it up, somewhere in the New Testament that talks about the 5-fold ministries. And basically what they do basically what it is there's these 5 distinct sort of categories of ministry. And it tells you like, these are the things that I'm really good at, and these are the things that I'm, maybe not as good at.
Mhm.
But even from kind of like a more of a secular perspective, one of the things that shows up on my APEST is apostleship. And that has been really insightful for me over the past several years, because I can start to kind of identify like what that looks like in the church sphere is like starting new things and building things from the ground,
Mhm.
and then maybe passing them off to somebody else,
Right.
not managing those things long term, but kind of helping spin something up or ideating and creating something new and then moving on from it. And I like to do that in my regular everyday life too. Like I like to create new projects and I like to build new things, not carpentry wise, not things with my hands, but I like to
Conceptually.
create, systems and different things. And that really shows up in every area of my life, not just in my, faith areas.
Yeah. Another interesting thing about the strengths part of this exercise, and I think we're going to link Working Genius
Yes.
too, knowing your strengths, and a lot of these will allow you to really see how you fit into the different groups that you may be a part of, whether that's your how you interact with your team at work, or how you kind of fit into your family unit, or if you're volunteering with nonprofits and things like that. If you know certain things about yourself, it really allows you to allow other people to benefit from your participation in a better way. If you can step up and say, hey, these are my strengths, also these are my weaknesses, you can really find yourself as a better fit in organizations where you are and things that you're doing, so that you aren't volunteering to do admin stuff when paperwork makes you crazy.
Yeah.
You can really kind of lean into your strengths and do things, and then allow other people to do what they're great at
Yeah.
that are possibly your weaknesses.
Yeah, absolutely. The Working Genius is, I think, one of the newer things that we've encountered
Mhm.
as far as the assessments and those types of things go. And it has probably been one of my favorite ones ever since
Yeah.
I think it was after COVID
Mhm.
or around that time that we
Yeah.
discovered it. And it's a really cool one. If you're not familiar with Patrick Lencioni, he is an author, speaker, and he developed that model. And
Yeah.
he is one of my favorite kind of thought leaders in that area. And I'll link his stuff in the
Yeah.
show notes as well. But really, really good. And it really essentially breaks down from the beginning of a project, from ideation all the way to completion. And where do you fall on this? And I am super weird. I think the rarest type of working genius. My two top geniuses is what they call them, but my two top strengths are the very first and the very last of a project. So the wonder is
Mhm.
me, kind of asking the what if question, like how could we do this
Right.
better? Like how can we break the status quo and improve or innovate on this? And then my last one, or my other one, is tenacity, which is the
Mhm.
very last one, and that is getting things all the way across the finish line. Problem with that is somewhere in the middle, I'm going to need people to shore up my
Right.
weaknesses a little bit. And then your working genius is a little more diverse. Right?
Ideation and discernment are my geniuses, and then wonder and tenacity are my frustrations.
That's right.
And then, so I'm a weird test taker, and this could be I'm a bad test taker. I tend to test average across. Like they're like, you're just good at everything. Like the APEST, I need to take it again because it said I was good at all 5, and that is just a lie. It's a lie from the pits of hell. Like, that is just not true. I'm not good at all of them. But it literally just equally split me. But the 4 working geniuses that are my genius and competencies actually all came up as geniuses. And then it had me, so it gave me some more questions and said, let's kind of figure this out. And so then it put the other 2 as my like competencies, which I appreciate on that test too, that it list them as competencies and says, and even your frustrations, you can do them. I can get a project across the line.
Mm-hmm.
It just is,
It's
I don't
draining.
want to do it very often because it is draining for me. So I'm capable of doing those things. And I have found that if it aligns with my passion, then wonder and tenacity don't bother me.
Yeah, and that's where it always, as we start to look at the top of the funnel, like your personality is always going to inform your passions,
Right.
always going to inform your, your strengths and talents. And then as we move into the next episode, what are the things you're developing and how are you walking this out in your life? And what are the things that you're, actually living in your experiences? So,
yeah. So I would say that too is helpful when you're looking at these, to look at things that drain you versus energizing you. Because those are kind of going to cue you in on those things. Because like I said, wonder and tenacity don't frustrate me if it's things that I'm passionate about. I can dream all day long and bring projects to fruition if it's something that I'm passionate about.
right.
But if I'm not passionate, I don't want to do it.
Yeah, Patrick Lencioni has a whole podcast just about the working genius. I think there are 100-something episodes in now.
How many podcasts do you think you listen to?
Oh, so many. Just way too many. I don't listen to music. I just listen
I
to
don't know
podcasts.
how you have more tiny humans than I do and
Uh,
seemingly way more time than I do.
I'd listen to podcasts all day.
I need a wife. That's what I need.
That might do it. That might do it. But when when I'm doing those
Yeah.
like household chores, like washing the
Yeah.
dishes, I'll listen to podcasts.
I was telling a friend I have auditory processing issues. And so I cannot listen to something and do other things. I have to listen.
Yeah.
And so if I'm listening to a podcast, I really just kind of have to chill. If
Yeah.
I'm doing other things, then my brain starts to thinking about things that aren't the podcast. And so
You just miss it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I listen to a lot of podcasts, but Patrick Lencioni has a podcast just about the working genius, and he talks about that a little bit in that he used the analogy of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Your geniuses are if you pour coffee into like a Yeti mug, like
Right.
that thing's gonna stay hot and fresh and good for a long time. Eventually it's gonna get like you can't just do anything forever.
Right.
But it's gonna stay, really good for a long time. Your competencies are like pouring coffee into like a styrofoam cup. It's gonna be fine for a while. It's not gonna be as good as it is in the Yeti cup,
Right.
but it's gonna be fine for a little bit. And then your frustrations are like he said, pouring coffee into a mug that has a hole in the bottom. It's like sometimes you still got to do them. Like sometimes you still gotta, and you
Right.
can pour really fast and get the thing to raise, but you're gonna lose
Yeah.
it quick. And it's not gonna be something that you're particularly good at. It's gonna be something that you hate to do. But sometimes you just kind of do it. But it lays them out really,
Yeah.
really well.
We had a conversation with a friend of ours about the spiritual gifts that was similar to that. And as a person of faith, he was just sharing that there have been seasons where he felt like certain spiritual gifts were increased in him
yeah.
out of necessity, that it was kind of this supernatural
Mhm.
gifting of, I need to be good at this right now. And so I can have this ability for a period of time
Mhm.
until people come along who that's their natural giftings and can step into
Yeah.
those spaces. And so sometimes we can operate outside of our gifts and strengths and those things when it needs to get done.
Yeah. And sometimes we just have to.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you don't do it, nobody's going to do it, and it's just got to get done. And so that is kind of the first half of the Made for This exercise. And just as a quick recap, we talked about personality, just kind of how you're naturally wired, passion, the things that you're just naturally really interested in, strengths, the things that you're just really naturally gifted in or talented in. And then in the next episode, we're going to talk about the things that take a little bit more effort from you, the things that you have to develop, and just the experiences that you have or the experiences that you step into. And so, Nikki, is there anything else before we wrap this one up you want to talk about?
I don't think so. Take lots of tests
Yep.
and ask lots of people.
Yep. That I will reiterate that, double down on that.
And once you have this whole exercise, walk somebody else through it.
Yeah.
Because to teach is to learn twice. Somebody said that one time.
Somebody said that one time. I can't recommend that enough, to go through this whole exercise over this episode and the next. And if you're listening to these in real time, then it's just a week or an episode away.
Yeah.
And then if you're binging these later on, then just go ahead and listen to it right now.
Right.
And kind of walk through this exercise. It may take you, a day, or it may take you some time to chew on over the course of a week or few weeks. But it's really valuable. Take as many of the assessments as you can or as you want to, and then talk to people. Ask questions, be in relationship with people, whether it's a small group at church or a coworker group, or just a group of friends that you like to hang out with, whatever. Just ask them some of these questions and just have the conversations. And if they aren't listening to the podcast, share it with them and keep having the conversations, because ultimately Nikki and I's whole kind of goal behind this podcast is just to start these conversations and to get more people thinking about, why the heck was I put on this earth? And we talked about in the first couple episodes why it's important and what it is. And so I think that is about it for this episode. If you are liking this, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you can, leave us a comment or a rating or whatever the platform you're on allows you to do. And we can't wait to talk to you in the next episode.